okay? Like we've been saying, fills those ventricles and the canal. Yes, definitely washing over this tissue. Constant production all day long, about half a liter. We constantly produce it, let it wash over, and then it returns. But wait a minute. Is my brain just open to everything in my body? No. My brain is very well protected. So the return actually involves special, these little areas that are going to get created, once again, by the meninges, because the meninges are the wrappings around this tissue that are protecting it. So to get it back out, all right, the meninges will work to do that. So they'll help return it to the blood so that we can get filtration. Hopefully, what's coming to the capillaries next is going to be filtered blood. The ependymal cells will create the blood flow that comes in. They'll take it, modify it, create the CSF. The way that we're going to get it to move around is also in these ventricles that are present and some of the cells that are present. They're going to have cilia. You guys remember cilia? Okay, they work in a fashion that's like a wave, all right? Every time our heart beats and the blood comes in, it's a movement that's going to cause the cilia to beat. And the cilia are going to help move that CSF around the tissue and get it back. It follows that pattern flow. First, second ventricle to the third, to the fourth, to the canal, and then it begins to wash, bathe, and it's going to leave by areas called arachnoid granulations, which are formed by the dura mater, but I didn't get into that. Okay? They'll meet up with blood vessels that don't get to enter the brain. They just simply pick it up. The job is making sure that our brain has buoyancy within the skull. Okay? If it didn't, the structure of our brain, basically making sure this structure right here, because remember, it's sitting in the skull bones, okay? And because this fluid is present, we get a little buoyancy that's present. If that wasn't there because of gravity, and gravity's always pushing down on us, okay? The bone, the skull, this would, without that fluid, this would literally press on the bones and you'd be dead. So CSF is a good thing. And it also helps a little bit with the jarring that could take place. Not great. Okay? That's why something very simple can jar the brain, make it hit the sides of the skull casing, and you end up with concussions. Okay? A lot of information out there now coming around with concussions. So the buoyancy, the protection, chemical stability. What does that mean? Go ahead. What kinds of chemicals? Well, what do we think of at these cells? materials that they need.
Ions.
Got to pay attention to the ions. If that's the case, what okay, ions having those negatives and positives, okay, all right. Can you think of something that could be affected based on pluses and minuses in the body? Well, now that's going to help with passing. But do you guys remember the pH scale? Okay. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the pH of our blood should be about 7.45. In other areas of the body, pH can vary. The tissue of the brain. Do we want that to vary from 7.45 to anything else? Absolutely not. Why? What is it about the pH scale that is so detrimental to our bodies that a change of 7.45 to 7.35 could be deadly? Because we're dealing with acidity, basic, and when you look at that pH scale, where you've got your 0 to roughly 14, 7 in the middle, where this is going to be acidic, this is going to be basic, okay? Every time something moves on the pH scale, like if we go from 7 to 8 or 7 to 6, it is not a linear scale. It's what type of scale?
Logarithmic.
It is logarithmic. Meaning, every time there is a change on the pH scale, it's by a factor of 10. So if this represents H pluses, if bases represent OH negative, going up or down means we increase that plus or minus by a factor of 10. That is deadly to our bodies. The brain will work extremely hard to make sure that doesn't occur. It's going to make sure that pH, oxygen levels, it's going to make sure that every level of chemical that it has to deal with is going to stay in a very tight range. Otherwise, the cells die. I don't know about y'all. Well, I don't know. I kind of like them working. Just saying. Okay? So even though we do stuff to damage those cells, in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of nice that these cells are paying such close attention. Okay, let's say that a person with COPD, okay, where carbon dioxide is built up too much in their system, they may be getting oxygen, but the problem is the exchange that needs to occur. And so basically this attacks all other tissues of the body, including the brain. So they will have those effects from it, like they could get dizzy, they could pass out, they could faint, that sort of thing. So pH goes up. pH goes up. If it goes up or down significantly, it could lead to death of those cells, which, depending on the area of the brain it affects, would result in effects somewhere else in the body. Yeah. So the chemical stability becomes very important in the brain tissue. And one of the ways that the brain's going to do that is the CSF will help. Not do it completely, because it's going to be up to other systems of the body to keep our blood at the level it should be. Does that make sense? So the CSF, as we look at our ventricles, all right, you see how they're trying to represent these spongy masses, okay? And so these spongy masses give rise to the CSF. But one of the things that was noted, it has a specific pattern. This is the pattern of the flow of CSF in these tissues. So if we get our production in the ventricles, as they pass through the aqueducts, as we make our way to the central canal, they're trying to show us that the fluid, like if we're looking at the spinal cord area, we get a washing. Do you see how it looks like it's washing around that tissue? And then it begins to come up and move in a particular pattern until it reaches an area. See those arachnoid granulations, the arachnoid mata, these little projections that are existing, so that it can leave. After it has gathered any type of waste and that sort of thing, to exit and return to the bloodstream. So the pattern doesn't change. It shouldn't change. Let's put it that way. But human body, anything's possible. Questions there, phone? Okay, so now blood supply. There we go. I don't walk around with that percentage in my head because that's something I can look up. 15% of the blood, every time your heart beats, makes its way to this tissue. It'll consume 20% of oxygen and glucose for the blood, from blood. Any interruption to blood flow to this tissue is bad, not good, no matter what the situation might be, okay? It can lead to unconsciousness, impairment, all the way to the actual functioning of the brain, to irreversible brain damage. This is usually what can happen when people have a stroke or a heart attack, okay? Because in both, the disruption of the blood flow has occurred, and depending upon what area of the brain that it was feeding, that tissue can actually die in that area of the brain. But the other